Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Greenskins, led by the Night Goblin War Boss, who I actually have been really enjoying. I feel like he's a very viable option. Granted, I really do like Skarsnik, but the fact that he can carry potions is very strong. He also has armor piercing. If I'm not mistaken, he has anti-infantry and pretty good combat stats all around. So, and as a duelist, a kind of heroic duelist unit, poison makes a huge difference in kind of finishing off, those flying units who land and can usually get away, but if you do poison them, it's very strong. Also, he has this ability here, which is Spite of the Bad Moon, which gives 48 missile parry with shield. So if you kind of mix it in with your Night Goblins in the front line and those low tier Goblin infantry, that can really help at absorbing that initial beatdown. Also, it does provide charge defense, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and take a look. Yeah, expert charge defense. So very nice ability there. As far as the rest of my army goes, I have a front line of Night Goblins, so I like these guys a lot. It kind of is a little bit of psychological warfare. They do have stock, so when my opponent's looking at my army right now, as you can see these Doom Divers flying gracefully towards my opponent, he cannot see these right now, so he just probably sees some Goblin Archers and Black Orcs, so really a lot of mystery and kind of makes it a little difficult to deploy your army in the initial phases of the battle. In the second line, I have Goblin Archers, who are very good for how much you're paying, especially, just in the numbers that they come in and how cheap they are. This is like 600 something resources, and they can do really good focused fire on a group of crossbowmen or something like that, so huge fan of those guys. Also, I should probably mention I do have the 8 peak loonies, who are very great. They're unbreakable, they have stock, poison attacks, and they also have a unique activatable attack. I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but it's pretty effective. I do use it in this battle, so hopefully I can get you guys a sneak peek of that. I also do have the Crimson Killers back here. Very awesome unit. I love the splash damage, just thematically so cool, carrying the 2 great weapons, and I actually think they're a pretty good inclusion in most of the Greenskin armies. I also have standard Black Orcs here, and then I do have 2 Doomdiver catapults, which I feel are very good against Empire. You can use them to chase flying lords. They're very good at shooting amber wizards out of the sky, kind of those low armored flying units, and they're also great at focusing Empire missile troops down. So huge fan of Doomdiver catapults, and I feel like they're an auto-include in most Greenskin armies. I also have a lot of kind of Vanguard action going on. So I have the 2 groups of Orc Boarboy Biggins. I have 2 Goblin Big Bosses to support them to kind of help win that Cav battle. And I have a group of SQUIG herds over here, and then I also Vanguarded 1 group over here. So my opponent, he does have Cav himself. He has Knights of the Blazing Sun and the Royal Altdorf Griffites. But it's going to be very hard to keep up with this group, and then 2 Cav groups also. So I was hoping to overwhelm my opponent with kind of those type of mobile numbers. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the Doom Divers are already applying fire, and you can see these groups take pretty heavy damage from Doom Divers. So got to focus down these units, because if you can get rid of your opponent's missile units, it gives you a huge flexibility in regards to harassing and moving around their forces without, taking damage. So very happy to deal with those. So you can see they've already taken a good, almost 20% HP damage, and there's going to be a lot more before the battle starts. And to be honest, if Doom Divers are in an ideal situation, they can shut down missile units before the battle even starts. And you can see the splash damage is also hitting the greatswords here, which is great. Definitely cannot complain. So I am posturing up my SQUIG herd and the Orc Boarboy Biggins over here, and then I'm also sneaking this SQUIG herd around here. So he's gonna have to send the Knights of the Blazing Sun after the SQUIG herd, and if you think about that on paper, that's about 1,200 resources for 600 here. And even though the SQUIG herds would obviously get slaughtered by the Knights of the Blazing Sun, if he's out there doing, chasing these, my infantry corps and other troops are going to be doing very well for themselves. So I'm going to engage on these Royal Altdorf Griffites right here. Definitely want to tie those guys down. They're a very strong unit and can honestly single-handedly turn battles if they're left for the late game. So I do send these Orc Boarboy Biggins with their armor piercing and anti-large. Unfortunately for me, he does chase off the SQUIG herd back here. You can see the Knights of the Blazing Sun riding down the poor SQUIGs. Definitely a bad situation, so they're going to break and flee. But in doing so, he does leave his flank exposed to these SQUIGs here. So these guys are going to get in here and just do absolute work against these handgunners. So that's kind of the thing. Having all these low-tier kind of mobile unit options, it's really hard to account for, especially if you're bringing the Royal Altdorf Griffites, because they can really only tie down 1 group of mobile infantry. So you can see the SQUIGs are definitely having a feast on these handgunners here, so I was very happy about that situation. In the meantime, my front line is advancing pretty well, and they haven't taken any missile fire. But thankfully for my opponent, the Knights of the Blazing Sun are just on SQUIG duty right now, but this other group will come back shortly, if I'm not mistaken. So in the front line, the Night Gobbos are engaged with the great swords, which is great. Poison, definitely very good against elite infantry. And also he has swordsmen mixed in here, and you can see, the Goblin missile fire is pressuring the great swords who don't have shields. So I was very happy about that. And of course, with the Black Orcs coming in against a bunch of poisoned infantry, it's going to be really brutal for my opponent. And I want to get some good screens of the Crimson Killers in here. When they swing, it is so cool seeing the kind of the splash effect. They definitely hit very hard. And when you can mix them in with Goblins, I know not a lot of them are attacking right now, but the Goblins are literally just taking the initial beating of these guys, and that will allow the Crimson Killers to get in there and just do work in just a moment here. So you can see they're leaving these great swords. In the back line, of course, the Royal Altdorf Griffites are absolute force to be reckoned with. Though they were decimated for the most part, they're still fighting, and my orc boars were kind of chased off. You can see I have 8 left here and a small group left here who are broken, and his Amber Wizard is doing a good job chasing those down. But thankfully, I still do have the 2 Goblin Big Bosses who do have their potions, so that's going to be very, very strong. And the Griffites, you can see, are taking a ton of Goblin Missile Fire, but they do charge into the 8 Peak Loonies, which thankfully for me was probably one of the best targets they could have gone after, because these guys are unbreakable, and they're going to poison them, tie them down, and allow these Goblin Archers to really just finish them off. So my opponent does pull some Auxiliary Greatswords, but they're continuing to be focused by those Doom Divers. That's what I love about Doom Divers. They're incredibly accurate. So if you can get them even shooting like in melees like this, it's going to do pretty good and usually will hit their target. So you can see the Royal Outdoor Griffites are indeed broken after taking that missile fire. And some of these Orc boars did come back with the Goblin Big Boss and will ensure that they stay off the battlefield. So in the rest of the front line, the Crimson Killers, you can see they're getting the Spite of the Bad Moon, giving them an expert charge defense, which is pretty irrelevant right now, but I did think he was going to come in with that General of the Empire, so I used it there. Definitely a very strong ability, but he does come in with the General, and the Night Goblin War Boss is going to get in there and try and defend these Gobbos back here who are just getting tossed around. You can see he's kind of doing laps, but also bringing in a Goblin Big Boss to kind of lock him down would be very helpful. But unfortunately, he does end up right in the middle of the Crimson Killers who are going to turn on him and just lay an absolute smackdown. In the back line, some Squigs and Orc Warboys. I think some Squigs came back. These Knights of the Blazing Sun really have been putting in a huge effort to kill the Squigs today, which is okay. They're a very cheap unit, so and you guys saw they were able to generate some good value. But my opponent is also using the Flock of Doom on these units here, but to be honest, these Swordsmen and Greatswords, without the support of the Handgunners and also the Cav being very tied up, are kind of getting overwhelmed a little bit. But in the center, he actually does crack my line, and that's largely because of this Manticore he summoned, which does cause terror, and obviously Goblins being a very low leadership type unit, in general will just rout quite easily, but you can see the Doom Divers kind of retaliating there, hitting their allies and foes alike. Definitely one of my favorite parts about playing the Goblins. But over here, the General of the Empire did take a ton of damage. He did unfortunately get corralled into the Crimson Killers here, as well as the Goblin Big Boss and the Night Goblin Big Boss. So that's what I really like about these Goblin leadership goon squads. Is they're very good. They're very fast. I mean, this guy has 84 speed, and I believe the Big Boss has like almost 90. So they're very good for hunting units down, poisoning them, and not letting them escape. And I think my opponent, he does get the Royal Outdoor Griffites back. It's such an elite unit. The fact that they just keep coming back, and I mean, even a few of them is almost equivalent to like a heroic unit. And they do cause terror, so another thing, a lot of Goblin leadership units will get terrified. As you can see here in just a moment, my Night Goblin War Boss is indeed frightened by an enemy unit, and he probably will get terrified here in a moment, so very, very scary situation. The Crimson Killers over here just finishing off the last of these great swords, and they should make quick work. You can see these guys are just getting absolutely cleaved. So very, very cool. Definitely one of my new favorite regiments over now. I really like all those like heavy-hitting regiments they added, like the Peak Gate Guard and the Crimson Killers. Personally, I think the Peak Gate Guard are probably a little better with their sundering ability, but these guys are still absolutely close to be reckoned with. Over here, some Black Orcs are kind of finishing off their remaining greatswords, but it's not as far apart as it looked earlier. He still has some troops fighting, and some troops will be coming back from rout here shortly. And he also does have the Knights of the Blazing Sun, who are kind of still in good health. They're still confident, and they're riding down, and got a nice little flank here on these Crimson Killers here. So, but regardless, the Crimson Killers will still do a really good job dealing with them, as they don't have the armor piercing. But you can see the Goblin Big Boss and other troops here we're able to pop their potion. You can see the potion of melee defense, and the potion of foolhardiness is really, really good, but my opponent makes a very good play. He kind of clumps up all my troops here and then uses a nice Flock of Doom, so still a very, very close battle, but I think the fact that my opponent's general did flee off the battlefield is going to be a little too much for him to come back from. He does have this Manticore and Amber Wizard, and I believe his knights did indeed get wiped out. And most of the troops he does have left are just shattering at this point, so that looks to be all she wrote for my opponent, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed that Greenskin battle. Definitely a lot of fun. They're just have so many cool new units. I mean, let's go ahead and take a look. So the Night Goblins are very, very good. They're shielded, and especially when you mix them with the Night Goblin Big Boss to give them the charge defense as well as the missile parry, it's very, very strong. Granted, I didn't take too much missile fire, so we didn't get to see the efficacy of that, but I feel like it'll be good in a lot of matchups. The Black Orcs, obviously MVPs. These guys are just so good. Just such a great unit, but the Loonies also. I love the fact that they're unbreakable, so it's basically just this perpetual poison on your opponent. And of course, the Night Goblin, or not the Night Goblin Archers, but the Goblin Archers, very low tier. But you saw they put a good beating on the Royal Outdoor Griffites, and they also occupied a fair amount of my opponent's attention, so I can't complain there. Orc Warboy Biggins, they did their job. They just kind of were sacrificed to the Outdoor Griffites. I knew they weren't going to last long, but if they could keep the Griffites from terrorizing my front line, that's all you can ask for. The Squigs were more of a distraction, but they still did good. You saw they were able to tear apart those handgunners and kind of occupy the Knights of the Blazing Sun. So, hey, for how cheap they are, I can't complain. And of course, Doom Divers, can't say enough. As far as swordsmen go, I don't know how good of a choice they are, but it is a bit of a meta pick because a lot of greenskin armies now are just spamming tons of goblin archers. So having a front line of swordsmen probably isn't a terrible choice, but they'll do okay against goblins, and obviously they're going to get crushed by black orcs. But still, it's an interesting pick. He did bring greatswords, which were obviously good, but they did get nerfed. So you can tell perhaps if these were pre-nerf greatswords, it would have been a closer battle. And the handgunners were a little tricky. I probably would have bought some crossbowmen or other troops like that. These guys were obstructed for a lot of the battle and didn't really get a chance to fight. But of course, the Griffites and the Blazing Sun Knights were quite good. So regardless, great game to my opponent, Flip. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that Greenskin Battlecast. Have an excellent night, and take care.